elevator doors slid open with a metallic hiss, and Mara Chen stepped into the 40th floor of Ward Industries, her heart hammering against her ribs. The corridor stretched before her like a throat, all glass and steel and cold fluorescent light. Somewhere in this building, behind closed doors and layers of security, was the man they called a monster. Elias Ward, the billionaire CEO who wore a mask to hide scars so terrible that grown men had quit after a single meeting. The man who'd fired 3 secretaries in 2 months. The man whose temper, according to whispered rumors in break rooms across the city, could turn violent without warning. And as of 8:30 this morning, Mara was his new personal secretary. She gripped her leather portfolio tighter and walked forward, her heels clicking against polished marble, each step taking her closer to whatever fate awaited behind those imposing double doors at the end of the hall. The receptionist, a woman with silver hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful, glanced up from her computer screen. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Mara approaching. "You're the new one," she said, not a question but a statement laced with something that might have been pity. "Mr. Ward is expecting you. Conference room 3, down the hall, last door on your right." She paused, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. "A word of advice. Don't make eye contact. Don't ask questions. Don't try to be friendly. Just do exactly what he tells you, and maybe you'll last longer than the others." Mara felt ice slide down her spine, but she forced herself to nod professionally. "Thank you." She moved past the reception desk, past offices where employees hunched over their computers, past conference rooms where people spoke in hushed tones. Everyone she passed had the same look, the same tension in their shoulders, as if they were all waiting for something terrible to happen. The atmosphere wasn't just corporate, it was suffocating, heavy with fear that seemed to seep from the very walls. She found conference room 3 and knocked twice, the sound sharp and final, for a moment nothing. Then a voice, low and rough, called from inside, "Enter." Mara pushed the door open and stepped into a room dominated by a massive glass table and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, but she barely registered the view, because standing at the far end of the room, his back to her, was Elias Ward. He was tall, broad-shouldered beneath an immaculate black suit, his dark hair touched with silver at the temples, and covering the entire right side of his face, from forehead to jaw, was a mask. Not decorative or theatrical, but medical grade, matte black, fitted perfectly to the contours of his face like a second skin. He didn't turn around. "Mara Chen, 27, MBA from Stanford, 3 years experience in executive assistance. References are impeccable, though I notice you left your last position rather suddenly." His voice was controlled, each word clipped and precise. "Why?" Mara straightened her shoulders. "My previous employer asked me to falsify financial records. I refused and resigned the same day." "Honest or stupid?" He still hadn't turned to face her. "Honest, sir. Stupidity would have been staying and becoming complicit." Finally he turned and Mara got her first full look at him. The mask covered the right side of his face completely, but his left side was visible, striking even in its severity. Sharp cheekbone, strong jaw, an eye so dark it was almost black, watching her with an intensity that made her feel dissected. His mouth, what she could see of it, was pressed into a thin line. He studied her for a long moment, and Mara forced herself to meet his gaze, to not look away, to not stare at the mask. "Your duties are simple," he said, moving to the table and picking up a tablet. "Manage my schedule, screen my calls, prepare briefs for meetings, handle correspondence. You'll work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Sometimes later, you'll have access to confidential information that could destroy this company if leaked. You'll report directly to me and only me. Questions?" "Just one, sir. The previous secretaries, why did they leave?" His eye narrowed slightly. "They couldn't handle the job." "Respectfully, I'm asking what specifically they couldn't handle." For a moment, Mara thought she'd overstepped, that he'd fire her on the spot like the rumors said he did. But instead, something shifted in his expression, a flicker of something that might have been surprise. "Me," he said flatly. "They couldn't handle working for me. Most people can't. If you're smart, Miss Chen, you'll keep your head down, do your work, and avoid any unnecessary interaction. We're not friends. We're not colleagues. I'm your employer, and you're a function. Nothing more. Understood?" "Understood, sir." "Good. Your desk is outside my office. Get familiar with the systems. I have a board meeting in 2 hours, and I need the quarterly reports formatted and ready." He turned back to the window, dismissing her. That's all. Mara left the conference room, her mind spinning. The man was cold, harsh, intimidating, but she noticed something the others apparently hadn't. When he turned to face her, when he'd spoken about people not being able to handle him, his left hand had trembled slightly before he'd pressed it flat against the table. Not anger, not violence, fear, or maybe anxiety. Elias Ward, the monster of Ward Industries, was afraid. The days that followed fell into a brutal pattern. Mara arrived at 7 sharp every morning to find Elias already in his office, the door always closed. She'd announce herself via intercom, and he'd respond with clipped instructions. Prepare these documents, cancel that meeting, research this acquisition. His commands came rapid fire, delivered in that same flat, emotionless tone. He never invited her into his office unless absolutely necessary, and when he did, the interactions were painfully brief. He'd accept documents without looking at her, sign papers without comment, dismiss her with a curt nod. But Mara watched. She couldn't help it. She noticed that he ate lunch alone in his office, door locked, blinds drawn. She noticed that he scheduled all his video conferences for audio only. She noticed that when employees passed his office, they quickened their pace, eyes fixed forward, as if proximity to him was dangerous. The whispers continued in the break room, in the elevators, in the bathrooms. Tales of his temper, of people called into his office and emerging in tears, of his absolute refusal to attend company social events or appear in any situation where the mask might be questioned. He once threw a stapler at someone's head, a woman from accounting whispered during Mara's first week. Barely missed. Guy quit that afternoon. I heard he got those scars in prison, another voice added, some kind of gang violence. No, it was a car accident. Killed his whole family. He was driving drunk. That's not it at all. It was a fire. Corporate sabotage or something. Mara kept her expression neutral, but inside frustration built. They talked about him like he wasn't human, like he was some kind of creature to be feared and avoided. And maybe he encouraged it. Maybe he preferred fear to pity. But none of it aligned with what she experienced daily. Yes, he was demanding. Yes, he was cold. But he was never cruel, never raised his voice, never made unreasonable demands. He was simply closed off, locked behind walls of his own making. 3 weeks into the job, everything shifted. Mara had been working late, finishing a presentation for a merger negotiation, scheduled for the next morning. It was past 9, the office dark except for her desk lamp and the light bleeding from under Elias's door. She'd compiled the final slides and needed his approval before sending them to the board. She knocked on his door, waited for his usual terse, "Come in," and entered. He was standing by the window, his back to her, and in the reflection of the glass, Mara saw something that made her freeze. The mask was off. She could see the right side of his face reflected in the dark window, and the scars were extensive, yes, raised and textured, the skin pulled tight in places where it had healed badly. But they weren't monstrous. They were simply scars, evidence of terrible pain survived, and in the dim light, with his expression unguarded, he looked unbearably sad. "Sir, I have the presentation ready," she began, and he whirled around, his hand flying to his face, but it was too late. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, they stood there, Mara seeing him fully, and Elias frozen in something beyond embarrassment, beyond anger. It was raw terror, the look of someone whose deepest vulnerability had just been exposed. "Get out," he said, his voice shaking. "Get out now." "Mr. Ward, I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "I said, get out." He turned away from her, his shoulders rigid, and Mara realized he was trying to find the mask, trying to cover himself while keeping his face hidden from her view. She could have left. Should have left. But something in his voice, in the way his hands trembled as he fumbled for the mask on his desk, broke something open in her chest. "Your scars don't scare me," she said quietly. He went completely still. "What?" "Your scars. They don't scare me, Mr. Ward. You don't scare me." He didn't turn around, but his voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe not. But I know that everyone in this building is terrified of you for the wrong reasons. They think you're angry and violent. But you're not, are you? You're just trying to protect yourself." "Miss Chen, you're overstepping." "I know. I'm sorry. But someone should tell you that the monster everyone's afraid of doesn't exist." She set the tablet with the presentation on his desk. "The files are ready for your review. I'll be at my desk if you need anything." She turned to leave, and as she reached the door, she heard him speak again, so softly she almost missed it. It was a fire, 5 years ago. My wife and daughter were inside when it started. I got them out, but the ceiling collapsed. They didn't make it. And I lived. He still hadn't turned around, still kept his scarred side hidden. The investigators said it was faulty wiring, an accident. But I was the one who'd ignored the building inspection reports. I was too busy with work to care about something as mundane as electrical safety. So yes, Miss Chen, I am a monster. Just not the kind people think. Mara's throat tightened. You made a mistake. That doesn't make you a monster. It makes me a killer. Now he did turn, and even in the darkness she could see the anguish carved into his features, the self-hatred that had probably lived there for 5 years, eating away at him from the inside. So I'd appreciate it if you'd stop trying to see something redeemable in me. There isn't anything. There's just this. He gestured at his face, a reminder of what I destroyed. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Ward. But you're wrong. You're not what you think you are. She left before he could respond, her hands shaking as she gathered her things from her desk. She expected to find a termination notice the next morning, but instead when she arrived at 7, there was a note on her desk in Elias's sharp handwriting. Presentation approved. Well done. After that night, something changed between them, subtle but unmistakable. Elias still kept his door closed, still maintained professional distance, but the walls weren't quite as high. He started asking her opinion on decisions instead of just issuing orders. What do you think about this acquisition strategy? How would you handle this client situation? Does this email sound too harsh? Small things, incremental, but for a man who'd locked himself away from human connection for years, it was monumental. One evening, about a month after the incident with the mask, Mara brought him dinner. She'd noticed he rarely left his office during the day, that he survived on coffee and whatever he could have delivered without human interaction. So she'd stopped at his favorite restaurant, the one she'd discovered he ordered from 3 times a week, and picked up his usual order. She knocked on his door, entered at his acknowledgement, and set the bag on his desk. He looked up from his computer, confusion crossing his features. What's this? Dinner from Marcello's. Chicken parmesan, extra sauce, no cheese on the pasta like you always order. He stared at the bag as if it might contain a bomb. You didn't have to do that. I know, but I was picking up dinner for myself anyway, and I thought you might be hungry. She turned to leave, then paused. Also, for what it's worth, you should eat at a table occasionally instead of at your desk. Better for digestion. To her absolute shock, the corner of his mouth quirked upward just slightly. Are you mothering me, Miss Chen? No, sir. Just offering unsolicited medical advice. Noted. He opened the bag, and the smell of garlic and tomato sauce filled the office. He hesitated, then looked at her. Did you get dinner for yourself? Yes, sir. It's at my desk. Bring it in here. We can go over the Morrison contract while we eat. It became a routine. 3 nights a week, Mara would pick up dinner, and they'd eat in his office while discussing business. Slowly, carefully, the conversations began to drift beyond work. He asked about her family, her background, why she'd chosen this career. She asked about his company, his vision, the early days of Ward Industries. They never discussed the fire again, never mentioned the scars, but they were always there, an unspoken presence in every interaction. Elias began to relax around her, just fractionally. She noticed he didn't tense quite as much when she entered his office. His responses became less clipped, more natural. Once, when she made a joke about the absurdity of corporate jargon, he actually laughed, a rusty sound like something long unused being brought back to life. You're right, he'd said, still smiling slightly. We do talk like robots sometimes. And Mara had felt an absurd surge of pride at making him laugh, at seeing him be something other than the closed-off, haunted man he showed the world, but the outside world wasn't kind to their developing connection. Office gossip, always present, began to focus on Mara with increasing intensity. She'd hear the whispers stop when she entered break rooms, see the looks exchanged between employees. She's after his money, obviously. How desperate do you have to be? I heard she's the only one he tolerates because she doesn't mind the mask. It's sick, really. He's using her, and she's letting him. Mara tried to ignore it, but the comments wore on her, each one a small cut. She'd never cared much about office politics before, but this felt different. More personal, more cruel, And when she overheard two women from HR discussing her in the bathroom, their voices bouncing off tile walls, she finally understood how deep the judgment ran. "I give it another month before he fires her, too," one voice said. "She's probably starting to realize what he's really like." "Or she's fallen for him," the other voice replied, and both women laughed, sharp and unkind. "Can you imagine thinking someone like that could actually care about you? She's delusional." Mara stood in the stall, frozen, her hands clenched into fists. She waited until they left before emerging, her reflection in the mirror showing eyes brighter than usual, jaw set with determination. Let them talk, let them judge. She knew the truth, and that was enough. But Elias heard the rumors, too. Mara didn't realize it until one evening when she arrived at his office for their usual dinner routine, only to find him standing at the window, tension radiating from every line of his body. "We need to stop this," he said without turning around. "Stop what, sir?" "These dinners, these conversations. People are talking, and it's affecting your reputation." "I don't care what people say." "You should." He finally turned, and his expression was anguished. "You should care, Mara. You deserve better than to be the subject of cruel gossip because you showed basic human kindness to someone like me." "Someone like you? What does that mean?" "You know what it means. Look at me." He gestured at his face, the mask that never came off during business hours. "I'm not someone you should be associating with. I'm not someone who can offer you anything but damage to your career and your reputation." "That's not your decision to make." "It's exactly my decision. I'm your employer, and I'm telling you that from now on, we keep things strictly professional. No more dinners, no more personal conversations. You do your job, I do mine, and we maintain appropriate boundaries." Mara felt something crack in her chest. "Is that really what you want?" "What I want is irrelevant. This is what's best for you. Stop deciding what's best for me." The words came out sharper than she intended, and she saw him flinch. "I'm an adult, Mr. Ward. I can make my own choices. And if I choose to have dinner with you, to have conversations with you, that's my choice. Not theirs, not yours, mine. You don't understand? I understand perfectly. You've decided that you're not worthy of basic human connection, so you're pushing away the one person who's tried to see past your walls. You're letting fear and guilt make your decisions for you." His jaw tightened. "You need to leave. Now." "Fine." Mara grabbed her bag from the chair where she'd set it. "But for what it's worth, Mr. Ward, you're wrong. About yourself. About what you deserve. About everything." She left before he could respond. Her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed until she was safely in the elevator, descending through 40 floors of glass and steel and whispered judgments. The next 2 weeks were torture. Elias retreated behind his walls completely, and Mara found herself interacting with the cold, closed-off version of him she'd met on her first day. All business, no warmth, no personal questions or shared moments. She did her job perfectly, professionally, and hated every second of it. The office felt colder somehow, emptier, and she realized with painful clarity that she'd fallen for him. Not despite his scars or his darkness, but because of his vulnerability, his intelligence, the way he'd slowly let her in. And now he'd shut her out completely, convinced he was protecting her. Then everything exploded. Mara arrived at work one Monday morning to find the office in chaos. Employees clustered around computer screens, voices raised in shock and speculation. She pushed through to her desk and opened her email, her stomach sinking as she saw the subject line: "The real face of Ward Industries." The message contained links to a website, and when she clicked through, her blood ran cold. Photographs, dozens of them. Elias without his mask, his scars on full display, taken with a long lens through his office windows. The captions were vicious. "Tech billionaire's monstrous secret revealed." The face behind the mask. Elias Ward exposed. Why this CEO hides shocking photos. Within hours, it was everywhere. News sites picked up the story. Social media exploded with comments, most of them cruel, some pitying, all of them treating Elias like a spectacle rather than a person. Mara tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She tried his office, but the door was locked, lights off. Security said he'd come in early before dawn and hadn't been seen since. She found him 3 hours later, not in his office, but in the executive parking garage, sitting in his car with the engine off, staring at nothing. She knocked on the window and he startled, his eyes meeting hers through the glass. For a moment she thought he'd drive away, but instead he unlocked the door. She slid into the passenger seat and they sat in silence for a long minute, the concrete walls around them and the weight of the world pressing down. "They're calling me a freak," he said finally, his voice hollow. "Reading through the comments, the articles, it's like watching people dissect something they find disgusting. I thought I'd gotten used to it over the years, but this, seeing it laid out for millions of people, it's worse than I imagined." "I'm so sorry. Do you know who leaked the photos?" "Richard Brennan, former business partner. I bought him out 2 years ago after discovering he was embezzling funds. He's been looking for revenge ever since." Elias rubbed his face tiredly. "I should have seen this coming. Should have been more careful." "This isn't your fault." "Isn't it? I've spent 5 years hiding, and all it did was make people more curious. Maybe if I'd just faced it from the beginning, owned it, this wouldn't feel so violating." Mara reached over and took his hand, the one that had trembled with fear that first day they met. He didn't pull away. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. "What can I do? Retreat further? Put out a statement through lawyers? Issue a denial that will only make things worse?" He laughed bitterly. "I'm trapped, Mara. Trapped by my own cowardice." "You're not a coward. You survived something unimaginable and kept going. That's not cowardice." "Then what is it?" "It's human." She squeezed his hand gently. "And you have a choice now. You can let this break you, or you can face it. Really face it. Stop hiding and show them that their cruelty doesn't define you." "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple. It's probably the hardest thing you'll ever do. But you don't have to do it alone." He finally looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw the fear there, the vulnerability, but also something else. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of it. "Why are you here, Mara?" "After I pushed you away, after everything, why are you still here?" "Because beneath the scars, beneath the walls, beneath everything you think makes you unlovable, there's someone worth knowing, someone I care about, and I'm not going anywhere." His hand tightened on hers. "I don't deserve you. Stop deciding what you deserve and start accepting what's being offered." They sat there for a while longer, hands clasped in the dim parking garage, and Mara felt something shift between them, a door opening that had been locked for far too long. 2 days later, Elias called an emergency company-wide meeting. The auditorium was packed, employees filing in with expressions ranging from curious to apprehensive. Mara stood at the back, her heart in her throat as Elias walked onto the stage. He was wearing his usual suit, but the mask was gone. His scars were visible under the harsh stage lights. The right side of his face, a map of suffering, survived. The room went silent, every eye fixed on him, and Mara could feel the collective shock rippling through the crowd. Elias stood at the podium, gripping it with both hands, and for a moment Mara thought he might falter. But then he straightened his shoulders and began to speak. "I'm sure you've all seen the photos by now. The articles, the comments. I'm sure you've heard every rumor about how I got these scars, most of them wrong, some of them deliberately cruel. So I'm going to tell you the truth once, and then I'm going to ask you to judge me not on my appearance or my past, but on my actions moving forward." He told them about the fire, about his wife Sarah and his daughter Emma, about the mistakes he'd made and the guilt he'd carried for 5 years. His voice never wavered, but Mara could see the cost of each word, the way his hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "I wore the mask because I was ashamed," he said. "Not of the scars themselves, but of what they represented. My failure as a husband and father, my negligence. I thought if people couldn't see them, maybe I could forget. But you can't forget grief and guilt. They live inside you regardless of what you hide on the outside." He paused, scanning the audience. "Many of you are afraid of me. I know that. I cultivated that fear because it was easier than risking connection, easier than allowing people to see me as human, rather than as the monster I believed myself to be. But my secretary, Mara Chen, told me something that changed my perspective." His eyes found hers in the crowd. "She said the monster everyone's afraid of doesn't exist, that I'm just a person trying to survive grief and guilt, in the only way I knew how. She was right, and I'm tired of hiding." The applause started slowly, one person, then another, then more, until the entire auditorium was standing, clapping, some people wiping tears from their eyes. Mara felt her own tears streaming down her face as she watched Elias stand there, exposed and vulnerable, finally accepting the compassion he'd denied himself for so long. After the meeting, as the auditorium emptied, Mara made her way to the stage. Elias was still there, gathering his notes, and when he saw her approaching, he set them down and waited. "That was incredibly brave," she said. That was terrifying, he corrected, but he was smiling. Really smiling, and Mara realized it was the first time she'd seen him look genuinely happy. But necessary. Thank you, Mara, for everything. For not running when everyone said you should. For seeing something in me worth saving. You saved yourself, she said. I just reminded you that you could. He reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle, questioning. The things people are saying about us, the gossip, the judgment, it's only going to get worse after this. Are you prepared for that? Let them talk. I know what's real. And what's real? This, she said simply. You and me. Whatever this is or could be, that's real. He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers, and Mara felt the last of his walls crumble. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. How to let someone in after so long. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out together. They left Ward Industries that evening side by side, walking through the lobby where employees watched with expressions ranging from shock to approval to lingering judgment. Mara didn't care. She'd made her choice, and she'd make it again every day if necessary. Outside, the city stretched before them, lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled over the streets. Elias stopped on the sidewalk, turning to face her fully. I spent 5 years believing I didn't deserve happiness, he said, that my scars were a punishment I had to bear alone. But you showed me something different. You showed me that survival isn't enough, that I could actually live again if I had the courage to try. And do you have the courage? He smiled, and it transformed his face, making the scars just another part of him rather than the defining feature. With you beside me? Yes, I think I do. They walked together into the evening, two people who'd found each other in the midst of pain and judgment and fear, who'd chosen connection over isolation, courage over comfort. Behind them, Ward Industries rose into the darkening sky, a monument to ambition and success. But ahead of them was something more valuable, the possibility of healing, of love, of a future built not on hiding from the past, but on accepting it and moving forward. The monster of Ward Industries had never existed. There was only a man who'd lost everything and found himself again through the eyes of someone brave enough to look past the scars and see the person beneath. If you enjoyed this story of redemption, courage, and finding love in unexpected places, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next emotional journey. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought of Elias and Mara's story, and don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that everyone deserves a second chance at happiness, and that true connection happens when we have the courage to be vulnerable. Thank you for watching, and remember, beneath every scar is a story of survival worth honoring.